Hello. I'm hoping that's gonna hold. I bent the light a little bit. Ooh, that's flat. There we go. How y'all doing today? Hope you're good. Wanted to share with you. Went to Chamblin's Uptown. There's also a bookstore, Chamblin's Book Mine, out on Roosevelt, but this one's downtown, or I guess uptown, or however you look at it. I don't really know the difference, I'm not gonna lie. But anyway, my friend went to the DMV and I dropped him off, and there's a little bookstore that I love right near there, so I went. So I wanted just to share some of the books that I found with you. So this one is Christmas, and it says Scented Treasury of Verse and Prose, which maybe a small scent. I wonder what it's supposed to be, but it's just, I mean, gorgeous, fun. I don't even know what. See the little sugar plum berries. Where's that big picture in the middle? I won't lie, super white, super Caucasian. But gorgeous, like what you would think of like Charles Dickens' Christmas era. Christmas Day at Sea, to Clive Bell. What else? Penhaligon's At Home, The Winter Garden. Just beautiful. I got a couple other Christmas books that we didn't have yet, so we'll add this to our Christmas treasury. I was very excited to find this. Great Expectations is the book that we're gonna read after Peter Pan. So we're on Black Beauty, next we'll read Peter Pan, and then I wanna read Great Expectations. And I'm very excited because I got a copy. Whoa, for less than I expected. And I don't know, I think it's gonna be good. There's some illustrations. We love a good illustration. Very excited about that one. This was a cool find. It was still in plastic wrap and everything, and I don't know if they put it in plastic wrap because it was on the newer side and they didn't want it to mess up, but it's a pop-up book called Mommy. But it's a mummy, and literally he walks in, Mommy? And there's just all these monsters. And what's that, a mad scientist maybe? Throughout the book. Very excited about adding this to our, not just pop-up collection, but Halloween pop-up collection. How cool is that? Very excited. I guess I should be telling y'all who these are by. You know Charles Dickens, that's going to be an array of authors, the Christmas one. This one is Sindak Yorkins Reinhardt. Sindak Yorinks, 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 I don't know, Reinhardt. This is another cool pop-up. They have a whole section of pop-ups. Usually they're on like a top shelf in the children's section. So I love looking through them. I collect pop-ups. I have like a whole shelf here. So love my pop-ups, love looking. And this is Waiting for Filippo, the life of Renaissance architect Filippo Brunelleschi. Is that how it's, I thought it was Brunelleschi, but this Brunelleschi, I guess that's similar. But the pop-up book is by Michael Bender. So it's just got some really cool pages, which I love. You know, learning made fun. I'm all about it. All about it. Little flip-up cards. You can read about it, learn about it. Look at this. Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. This was Filippo's favorite style. Like what you would put at the top of a pillar. Just neat. It's just cool. That's just cool. I don't know. It as a child, anything that could make my mind imagine new things or get excited. I remember I have like a dictionary. What's it called? A Scholastic Children's Dictionary, but the pictures they put in it and with like how-tos and diagrams, it just made me so excited. I remember having one that I carried with me all summer because it had information about an emergency raft, and we would go down to the lake and I was like, okay, we got to get all these things for the, I think, paddle boat. I don't know if I was like planning a raft. And you know how it is when you imagine as a child, you dream and then you come to terms with reality that like maybe you can't own an emergency raft, or maybe you don't. But it's just, I love that I can live there in my imagination, and then a book took me there. I think that's why still today, sometimes when I'm can y'all hear Johnny? Lord Jesus, I love that man. When I'm the happiest is when I'm dreaming about something, when I'm thinking about the possibilities. And yes, I love living it, I love experiencing it, but the dreaming of it can sometimes be 10 times more magnificent, you know, if you really live into the imagination of it. I don't know. This one's called A Quiet Place. It's by Douglas Wood. He's the author of Old Turtle, if you've ever heard of that. But it's just about somebody, he like lives in the city and he needs a quiet place. There's too much noise, and talking about how he can imagine it. He can crawl under a bush. He can walk into the woods, on the beach. He can live there, looking in the desert, and just gorgeous illustrations. That's why, illustrated by Dan Anderson. So Douglas Wood is the author, and Dan Anderson. Andreasen or Anderson. And it's not Anderson, unless it's a different pronunciation or like a writing is still pronounced Anderson. I don't know. Now you know the spelling. Gorgeous illustrations that, again, make me want to imagine and make me want to live in a different world in my head for a bit. Could go to a secret corner of the library. Such a beautiful escape libraries give us. Books give us. But yeah, loving it, loving it. I found Babar and Father Christmas, and it's one of like, I don't know, I feel like the newer Babars, they're smaller books, they're smaller print. They try and type it out now. I don't know. I feel like I love the older versions of it. Just so cool. So cool. Put that with the Christmas ones. And here we are. So thank you for letting me share those with you. And if you don't mind, I'd like to also share a chapter or two with you as well. We are on chapter 34, and it's called An Old War Horse. Captain had been broken in and trained for an army horse. The first owner was an officer of cavalry going out to the Crimean War. He said he quite enjoyed the training with all the other horses, trotting together, turning together, to the right hand or to the left, halting at the word of command or dashing forward at full speed at the sound of the trumpet or signal of the officer. He was, when young, a dark, dappled iron gray, and considered very handsome. His master, a young spirited gentleman, was very fond of him, and treated him from the first with the greatest care and kindness. He told me he thought the life of an army horse was very pleasant, but when he came to be sent abroad, over the sea in a giant ship, he almost changed his mind. That part of it, he said, was dreadful. Of course, we could not walk off the land into the ship, so they were obliged to put strong straps under our bodies, and when we were lifted off our legs in spite of our struggles, and were swung through the air over the water to the deck of the great vessel, we were placed in small closed stalls, and never for a long time saw the sky, or were able to stretch our legs. The ship sometimes rolled about in high winds, and we were knocked about,
and felt bad enough. However, at last it came to an end, and we were hauled up and swung over again to the land. We were very glad and snorted and neighed for joy when we once more felt firm ground under our feet. We soon found that the country we had come to was very different to our own, and that we had many hardships to endure besides the fighting. But many of the men were so fond of their horses that they did everything they could to make them comfortable in spite of snow, wet, and all things out of order. But what else? What about the fighting? Said I. Was not that worse than anything else? Well, said he, I hardly know. We always liked to hear the trumpet sound and to be called out, and were impatient to start off, though sometimes we had to stand for hours waiting for the word of command. And when the word was given, we used to spring forward as gaily and eagerly as if there were no cannonballs, bayonets, or bullets. I believe so long as we felt our rider firm in the saddle and his hand steady on the bridle, not one of us gave way to fear, not even when the terrible bombshells whirled through the air and burst into 1,000 pieces. I, with my noble master, went into many actions together without a wound, and though I saw a horse shot down with bullets, pierced through with lances, and gashed with fearful saber cuts, though we left them dead on the field or dying in the agony of their wounds, I don't think I feared for myself. My master's cheery voice, as he encouraged his men, made me feel as if I could not be killed. I had such perfect trust in him that whilst he was guiding me, I was ready to charge up to the very cannon's mouth. I saw many brave men cut down, many fall mortally wounded from their saddles. I had heard the cries and groans of the dying. I had cantered over ground slippery with blood, and frequently had to turn aside to avoid trampling on wounded man or horse. But until one dreadful day, I had never felt terror. That day I shall never forget. Here old Captain paused for a while and drew a long breath. I waited, and he went on. It was one autumn morning, and as usual, an hour before daybreak, our cavalry had turned out, ready comparison for the day's work, whether it might be fighting or waiting. The men stood by their horses, waiting, ready for orders. As the light increased, there seemed to be some excitement among the officers, and before the day was well begun, we heard the firing of the enemy's guns. Then one of the officers rode up and gave the word for the men to mount, and in a second every man was in his saddle, and every horse stood expecting the touch of the rein or the pressure of the rider's heels, all animated, all eager. But we still had been trained so well that except by the championing of our bits and the restive tossing of our heads from time to time, it could not be said that we stirred. My dear master and I were at the head of the line, and as all sat motionless and watchful, he took a little stray lock of my mane, which had turned over the wrong side, laid it over on the right side, and smoothed it down with his hand. Then patting my neck, he said, "We shall have a day of it today, Bayard, my beauty, and we'll do our duty as we have done." He stroked my neck that morning more, I think, than he had ever done before, quietly on and on, as if he were thinking of something else. I loved to feel his hand on my neck, and arched my crest proudly and happily, but I stood very still, for I knew all his moods, and when he liked me to be quiet, and when gay. I cannot tell all that happened on that day, but I will tell of the last charge that we made together. It was across a valley right in front of the enemy's cannon. By this time we were well used to the roar of heavy guns, the rattle of musket fire, and the flying of shot near us, but never had I been under such a fire as we rode through on that day. From the right, from the left, and from the front, shot and shell poured in upon us. Many a brave man went down, many a horse fell, flinging his rider to the earth. Many a horse without a rider ran wildly out of the ranks, then, terrified at being alone with no hand to guide him, came pressing in amongst old companions, to gallop with them to the charge. Fearful as it was, no one stopped, no one turned back. Every moment the ranks were thinned, but as our comrades fell, we closed in and kept them together, and instead of being shaken or staggered in our pace, our gallop became faster and faster as we neared the cannon, all clouded in white smoke, while the red fire flashed through. My master, my dear master, was cheering on his comrades, with his right arm raised on high, when one of the balls whizzing close to my head struck him. I felt him stagger with the shock, though he uttered no cry. I tried to check my speed, but the sword dropped him from his right hand. The rein fell loose from the left, and sinking backwards from the saddle, he fell to the earth. The other riders swept past us, and by the force of their charge, I was driven from the spot where he fell. I wanted to keep my place by his side, and not leave under that rush of horses' feet, but it was in vain, and now without a master or a friend, I was alone on that great slaughtered ground. Then fear took hold of me, and I trembled as I had never trembled before, and I too, as I had seen other horses do, tried to join in the ranks and gallop with them, but I was beaten off by the swords of the soldiers. Just then a soldier, whose horse had been killed under him, caught my bridle and mounted me, and with this new master I was again going forward. But our gallant company was cruelly overpowered, and those who remained alive after the fierce fight for the guns came galloping back over the same ground. Some of the horses had been so badly wounded that they could scarcely move from the loss of blood. Other noble creatures were trying on 3 legs to drag themselves along, and others were struggling to rise on their 4 feet when their hind legs had been shattered by shot. Their groans were piteous to hear. Piteous to hear, and the beseeching look in their eyes, as those who escaped passed by and left them to their fate, I shall never forget. After the battle, the wounded men were brought in, and the dead were buried. And what about the wounded horses? I said. Were they left to die? No. The army farriers went over the field with the pistols and shot all that were ruined. Some that had only slight wounds were brought back and attended to, but the greater part of the noble, willing creatures that went out that morning never came back. In our stables, there was only about 1 in 4 that returned. I never saw my master again. I believe he fell dead from the saddle. I never loved any other master so well. I went into many other engagements, but was only once wounded, and then not seriously. And when the war was over, I came back again to England, as sound and strong as when I went out. I said, I have heard people talk about war as if it were a very fine thing. Ah, he said, I should think they never saw it. No doubt it is very fine when there is no enemy, when it is just exercise and parade and sham fight. Yes, it is very fine then. But when thousands of good, brave men and horses are killed or crippled for life, it has a very different look. Do you know what they fought about? Said I. No, he said. That is more than a horse can understand. But the enemy must have been awfully wicked people if it was right to go all that way over the sea on purpose to kill them. War is a terrible thing. I will stand by that. I thoroughly believe that if we would invest as much money in conflict resolution as we do in war, in soldiers, in training them to combat, if we train just as many people in conflict resolution, in having conversations, in understanding other cultures, in the actual history of the world, not to shame, but to invoke empathy for others. We are not the best country. I know I'll probably get flack for that. It's like that song. Oh, what is it? Na, na, na. It talks about how great his country is, but then he also speaks to how there are other hearts in other lands are beating with countries just as beautiful as his. At the end of the day, we're all people that want to live, that want to survive, that want to experience beauty and love. And I have a firm belief that if we would invest as much in conflict resolution as war, how would the world not be more peaceful? Some pictures for you. One's called The Morning of Balaclava. And we've got the war horses lined up. One last picture. Thank y'all for listening in today. I'm gonna put I don't even remember what it's called, a warning up, so hopefully that didn't trigger anyone. I'm sorry if it did. I'm not gonna lie. In the middle of it, I was like, should I even read this? But if we don't read the truth, if we don't know the truth, how do we stop ourselves from reliving it? I wish you deep thought today, and I wish you peace.